Quick heads up, this story gets graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion advised.
This is a story that's frankly blood-chilling, but its real roots lie in a wild, toxic obsession. It's the story of a 17-year-old mother, Frankie, then a 26-year-old female boxer named Savannah, who she started dating. Be sure to watch this video all the way through, because at the end, we're gonna break down, step by step, how this toxic obsession led to a tragedy that everyone saw coming, but nobody stopped. Hey everyone, Vain True Crime here. We're not gonna drag out the intro, just let me know what city you're from, what time is it where you are, what's the weather like. Also, tell me, have you ever had an aggressive partner? Go grab a tea or coffee because we're getting started. I'll pass it over to Abby.
Today, we're diving into the absolutely, totally heartbreaking story of little Star Hobson. This is one of those cases that, it makes you wonder how something like this is even possible in the 21st century. Star was born, pretty recently, on May 21st, 2019, in the town of Keighley in West Yorkshire, England. Her parents were the 17-year-old Frankie Smith, a guy named Jordan Hobson, 17. As for Jordan's age, the information is a bit murky. The original source says they're not sure, which I suppose is maybe already a bit of a red flag, isn't it? So, Frankie Smith, the mother, she was the oldest of 5 kids in her family, but despite that status, her own relatives described her as somewhat immature for her age, which is, to put it mildly, not the best description for a new mom. She wasn't setting the world on fire in school, had significant learning difficulties, generally just couldn't ever find her place in life. Sort of a lost teenager. So yeah, Frankie had a pretty tough childhood. Though that term, honestly, probably doesn't even cover everything that was going on. Let's look at her family. Her father, Andrew, was known for having serious issues with... Eventually, Frankie just couldn't take it. Or maybe the situation became critical, so he moved in with her grandmother, Anita, her husband, David. Here's an interesting point. David wasn't biologically related to her. He wasn't her blood grandfather, but he was the one Frankie genuinely considered her real granddad, because he, unlike her biological father, was actually there for most of her life. Meanwhile, Frankie's mother, a woman named Yvonne, just kept raising the other 4 kids at home, meaning Frankie, the oldest, just sort of fell out of the nest. What about the relationship between Frankie herself? The father of Star, Jordan, it was described as intermittent, the classic on-again, off-again. This continued both during Frankie's pregnancy, also after little Star was born. Obviously, their relationship was extremely unstable from the get-go. It wasn't just intermittent, it was a constant emotional roller coaster. Some reports state directly that Jordan wasn't shy about cheating on Frankie. On top of that, he had a volatile temper, meaning he could easily fly off the handle, get furious if they started arguing, which, you have to admit, is not the best atmosphere for a pregnant girl or a new mother with an infant. So when Star was only about 4 months old, the couple officially split, period. What happens next? Star, of course, continued to live with her mother, Frankie. Jordan? Well, so when Star was only about 4 months old, the couple officially split, period. What happens next? Star, of course, continued to live with her mother, Frankie. Jordan moved back in with his parents. What's more, he then enrolled in university to, quote, finish his studies. What a great set of priorities, right? You just had a child, you go off to finish your studies. All right. After that, he apparently arranged a few visits with Star at his parents' house, but in the end, he just completely backed away from her. Completely. He stopped making any attempt to be involved in her life. Just vanished from the radar. What about Star herself? What was she like? She was known as a pretty calm baby who later grew into a very curious, active toddler. A normal kid. She adored listening to music, would do this funny little dance in her walker. She loved curling up on the sofa with family, when that family was around, to watch Peppa Pig eating her little baby snacks. By all accounts, she was almost always giggling, laughing, literally bringing light joy to everyone around her. Especially, it's noted, her grandfather, Andrew Smith, yes, the same one with her great-grandfather, Frank Smith. They say that when Frankie first had little Star, people around her noted she seemed really happy to be a mom. Maybe, I guess, it was that initial euphoria. But you have to understand, when Star was born, Frankie was extremely, catastrophically young. Let's repeat that. She was only 17 years old. She was still a kid herself. She didn't just need help, she needed total support. So logically, she eventually went back to her mother, Yvonne, to the same house where her 4 younger siblings lived. Returned for a while. Of course, it wasn't just about financial needs, although that was part of it. A 17-year-old girl can't support herself, and she needed massive help with just the basic physical care for Star. Her family, thankfully, was happy to provide that help. Her mother, Yvonne, her father, Andrew, despite all his problems, her grandparents, Anita, David, all of them supported Frankie at that stage. They genuinely helped with feedings, with diaper changes. They played with Star, they held her, they did everything to make sure this little, joyful, bright, beautiful girl knew she was so loved, cared for. At that moment, Frankie's family, it seemed they were just in awe of this charming little girl. It was, I suppose, an idyll. But as we understand, that idyll didn't last long.
Star, do you love your mums? Do you love me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, right after Star was born, Frankie, it seemed, played the part of the caring, devoted mother. But, this ideal, this maternal instinct, it didn't last very long. Just like a few months later, she started to clearly set her priorities. Unfortunately, those priorities shifted to a world of entertainment, recreation, not taking care of her own daughter. The little girl faded into the background. How did it start? Well, it all began when Frankie started going out, drinking late. With who, you might ask? With her own mother, Yvonne. Meaning, instead of the grandmother helping the young mom, the two of them were, as the source says, partying hard. 2 adult women, well, one adult, the other 17 years old, going out. What about the kids? They left Star, Frankie's other siblings, at home with various babysitters. So the responsibility was just pawned off on someone else. Then, one evening in October 2019, this is a key moment. 17-year-old Frankie went to a drag queen karaoke bar in Bradford. That's exactly where she met 26-year-old Savannah Brockill. Savannah wasn't a guest. She worked at the bar as security, a bouncer. According to later interviews, Frankie, who I'll remind you was immature, insecure, was initially drawn to Savannah's confident, outgoing personality. It's the classic story, I guess, where the weak are drawn to the strong, or maybe just to someone who seems strong. It said Frankie had never looked at women that way before. She'd never dated a woman. What's more, she'd never even shown any romantic interest in them. But something about this Savannah, about this female bouncer, really clicked, hooked Frankie. That night, they flirted a bit. It all ended with a simple exchange of contact information. Within just 2 weeks of meeting, they were officially dating. Really fast, right? Now, let's look at who this Savannah Brockill is. She's a very interesting character. As it's known, she comes from a very, very wealthy family. Her parents raised her, 4 other siblings, in $1 million home. It wasn't just a house. It was a huge compound in Lancashire, which had luxury caravans, chalets. So this isn't just rich. This is some other level entirely. Some reports even say that Savannah is, get this, a 3rd or 4th cousin of none other than the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, Tyson Fury. Yep, that Tyson Fury. How true that is, it's hard to say, but the connection to boxing is definitely there. There are photos of this Savannah posing in an impressive $5,000 mink coat. This is not 17-year-old Frankie from a troubled family. Her family was also described as travelers, leading a more temporary, nomadic lifestyle. Because of this traveler lifestyle, Savannah left school at 10 years old. 10, officially, to prepare for the life of a housewife. But it seems Savannah had other plans. Instead of learning to cook, she started training seriously in boxing martial arts. Apparently, she was pretty good at it because she eventually received a grant for £1,000 sterling a month. That's serious money for full-time training with the British women's boxing team. This moment, right here, sent Savannah's life in a completely different direction than housewife. She genuinely dreamed of one day going to the Olympics for boxing. That was her goal. However, at the age of 19, Savannah gets into a serious car accident, which resulted in a spinal injury. That injury, of course, ruined all her chances of ever becoming a professional boxer. End of the dream. After that, Savannah worked as a caregiver for a while. Then she sharply changed paths again, started working as a bouncer in bars, which is where she met Frankie, later as a dog handler. A pretty diverse resume. So these two started dating. Their relationship from day one was uncertain. That's a very mild word. From the very beginning, it was described as intermittent. The classic on-off. Here's where it gets interesting. Two versions of events. According to Savannah, version number 1, Frankie initially didn't want to tell her she had a daughter at all. When Savannah finally met little Star, Frankie, according to her, tried to lie, claiming Star was her younger sister. Only later did she finally admit that this was her daughter. Can you imagine that level of manipulation? Savannah also painted Frankie as an alcoholic, claiming she drank heavily, used alcohol to cope with her constant mood swings, emotional problems. She said Frankie was just obsessed with Savannah, running around telling people they were married, even tattooed Savannah's name on her forearm. But that was just Savannah's version. Frankie's version, her family's version, it tells a very different story. According to Frankie's circle, they noticed pretty early on that it was Savannah who was showing just this completely wild, controlling, possessive behavior. She had a say in everything Frankie ate. She set a strict sleep schedule for her. What is this, the army? She directed Frankie, saying that if any other man or even woman ever just looked at her, she would fly into a rage. There was one time when Frankie just dared to go out without Savannah. What happened? During that short time, Savannah didn't just call her a few times. She sent over 200 text messages. One time she posted a video online where she said, quote, "I am a psycho when it comes to my girlfriend."
Guys and girls need to remember the fact that Frankie is with me. She keeps getting a lot of message requests and friends requests. She's not going to accept.
Here's the result. Throughout their relationship, Frankie wanted to spend all her time exclusively with Savannah, which, naturally, meant we see this happen sometimes in relationships where a long-term couple has a baby. The mother, logically, starts giving the baby more attention than her partner. That's normal. But in unstable, often narcissistic relationships, but this situation is totally different. That's not what this was. In this case, Savannah's the partner who appeared in the mother's life after the child already existed. She found out shortly after that Frankie had a child, so it shouldn't have been any surprise. It wasn't like they built some idol, just the two of them, then this kid showed up, ruined everything. No, the child was there from the very beginning. It was a pre-existing condition, so being jealous of her, it's just absurd. In any case, this completely bizarre, irrational jealousy of Star started with small but very telling things. At first, when this started happening, everyone in the house, they were just afraid to say or do anything. Nobody wanted to upset Savannah. We remember why. She was very strong. She was a trained fighter, a professional boxer. Frankie, the mother, she was always by Savannah's side. She supported her. She told everyone around them that Savannah was a wonderful girl who treated her well. She apparently paid for food, bought Star expensive clothes, won a standard. Therefore, she was the best. Bought clothes. But thankfully, not everyone stayed silent. By January 2020, 16-year-old Holly Jones, who was Frankie's friend, also Star's babysitter, contacted social services. It's reported that by January 23rd, so not immediately, but they reacted, social services visited the home to check on things. The result? No concerns were expressed at this time. They came, said, "Oh, the house is well maintained." Seriously, they checked for cleanliness. Savannah, Frankie were clean, seemed to be following proper hygiene. Star also looked healthy, also clean. So they came, saw the floor was mopped, the kid was washed. That was it. The only need they identified for Star was housing. The social worker just referred the case to the housing department, to contact Frankie. That's all. After that, the first case was closed. Moving on, by February 2020, Frankie Savannah, get this, broke up. Seems like a positive development, but apparently, this breakup affected Frankie so badly that she, quote, felt she couldn't love Star anymore. I'm just gonna leave that there. She broke up with her girlfriend, so she can't love her own daughter. Right then, she just took Star, sent her to live with her grandmother, Anita Smith, her partner, David, the same people who had, effectively, raised Frankie herself. But after living just a short time in a normal atmosphere with Anita, David, Star began to literally thrive. She started looking so happy, so content. She started running around the furniture, crawling everywhere, just like a healthy toddler should. She loved taking baths, singing with her great-grandparents. She finally became a happy little kid. This period of safety lasted until April 2020, 2 months of peace. In April, Frankie just showed up, took Star from them, without any warning or discussion. It was a decision Frankie made without even talking to the people who had basically been saving her child for 2 months. She just took her. They both moved back in with Frankie's parents. What a coincidence. Right at the moment she took Star back, she renewed her relationship with Savannah. So she took the child from a safe place to go back. Of course, at this time, Frankie immediately stopped all contact with Anita David, also with Star's paternal grandparents. It didn't take long. By May 2020, various family members were increasingly worried about how Savannah was treating Star. What happened this time? The next day, social services did conduct an unannounced visit. But this is it's mind-boggling. They informed Frankie about an hour before their arrival. Of course, when they arrived, they spoke to Frankie about the accusations. What did she say? By this time, she obviously denied everything. But she went further. She told the social worker that Anita, the grandmother, was making these malicious claims because the social worker also interviewed Yvonne, Star's other grandmother. So no concerns were raised. The case is closed again. Moving on. Sunday, June 21st, 2020. This time, Jordan Hobson, Star's biological father, the one who went to finish his studies, also called the authorities. Why? A photo was posted on Facebook of Star. He was given the contact for the social worker already handling Star's case. So the case wasn't fully closed, I guess. He contacted her. Speaking to social services, Jordan expressed his opinion that Frankie was incapable of caring for Star.
Here's an important change. By this point, Frankie, with Star, had actually moved out of Yvonne's, Frankie's mom's house, moved in directly with Savannah. Police officers spoke again with Yvonne, another family member. Suddenly, Yvonne, who previously had no concerns, it seems that when Savannah was living with the family, everyone was just terrified to tell officers the truth. They were afraid of the psycho boxer. That's why they said they saw no problems. But only after Frankie Savannah moved out, the family members finally became more willing to talk about what was really happening. The fear, I guess, had subsided a bit. So, with this new testimony, officers went to Savannah's place, where Frankie Star now lived. What did they do? They contacted a medical team, who took Star to the hospital, conducted a full examination that same day. It seems like, okay, now the doctors will see everything. Star was simply discharged from the hospital, returned to her mother's partner. I don't know how to comment on that. At the same time, social services recontacted Yvonne, the grandmother, other family members who had just given testimony to the police. But when the social worker spoke again to Frankie, who had just been cleared by doctors, she just started up her old song. Frankie said that because she had just moved out of the family home, because she took Star from Anita's care, she felt people were just making these malicious claims, like her family was just mad at her for leaving. Because of this, Frankie said her family wouldn't be seeing Star for a long time because they were ruining her relationship with Savannah. The next day, September 2nd, great-grandfather David contacted social services again to inform them of the signs. This time he sent them the video to prove what he saw. But what did the social worker say? He contacted David, told him that someone had already been notified, referring to Frankie's call to the doctor. They believed Frankie again, not the video. They told David they had informed Star's doctor, who had advised Frankie to contact the 111 service. But luckily, after telling David all this, the social worker seems to have gotten suspicious, looked into it further. He noted that Frankie never actually called that 111 number. She didn't seek the help she was told to get. She just checked in with the doctor. But officially, I guess, the second one logged, which was a worrying signal. Finally, so a social worker was dispatched to the home to make a visit. The worker called Frankie to arrange the visit. Frankie told them they'd be out of town until September 4th. So the visit was scheduled for that day. Star's doctor also called, asked if they could come in for a visit or even do a virtual meeting since they were out of town, but Frankie refused. So September 4th, the social worker arrives. Here's the key detail. This social worker who came for the visit hadn't actually seen the video of the signs at that point. He had only heard the concerns expressed in the report. What does he see? During the visit, the social worker again considered the house clean, tidy, warm, the standard write-off. He felt Star had a healthy attachment to her mother. One that was backed by video was deemed malicious. No concerns were expressed. The case was closed for the 5th time. Absolute, total insanity. Yet every single time, the case was closed, the accusations found baseless or malicious. How? In part, as the source suggests, it might have been due to COVID, those strange restrictions caused by the pandemic. For example, some visits interviews with Frankie were virtual, over the internet. Obviously, when you're talking on Zoom, it's impossible to get a full picture of someone's home space. Then, even during in-person visits, some parts of the house were sectioned off. Workers were told they couldn't go there because of COVID. So some areas in the house where something might have been were just not checked. Things like this led to Star's case, like many other tragic cases from that time, not being investigated thoroughly. The system failed. We'll talk more about this systemic failure later. For now, during the weeks after that last fatal visit on September 4th, no further concerns were raised. The family, I guess, just gave up, seeing their reports labeled malicious. Silence. However, on September 22nd, 2020, just 1 week after the last case was closed, everything took a tragic, though, let's be honest, not remotely surprising, turn.
Medics, of course, rushed the child to the hospital. They were too late. Against the backdrop of what we just heard from the examination, when asked about those five reports filed with social services, she said that every time an accusation was made, she knew the case would be closed. Why? Then when asked about her relationship with Savannah, she said it was mostly good. They loved each other. Savannah loved Star. Of course, at this point, they launched a full investigation. Immediately after starting the investigation, police, of course, learned about those same multiple reports to social services. They knew there was a constant documented This, obviously, was the first major red flag. So the police started digging. On September 12th, 13th, 2020, just a little over a week before Star's passing, investigators found that Savannah, Frankie, Star went to Doncaster for the weekend. Why? Because Savannah was working there as a security guard There, at work, Savannah looked after Star.
Both women were tried together. The prosecution, of course, brought up absolutely everything we've discussed here. Right there, there's a huge power imbalance. With such a difference in age, experience. As the author says, 10 years or 9 years isn't that much when you're already a full adult, like 30, 40, but a 17-year-old kid, a 26-year-old adult, that's just not normal. That's manipulation. But besides that, her defense pulled out the trump card. They argued that Frankie actually had a very low IQ, just 70. This is, borderline for an intellectual disability. This made her much more vulnerable than the average person to manipulation, like Savannah. This was supported by facts. According to Frankie's family, as we remember, Frankie never did well in school. She was always behind her peers. What's more, even at 16, she was still playing with dolls. Then, at trial, a clinical psychologist testified that Frankie did indeed have a low IQ, which made her pathologically submissive to authority. Savannah was authority, made her constantly seek someone's validation. On the other hand, there's evidence proving Savannah was exactly the kind of person who took advantage of everyone around her. She probably knew right away that Frankie was easy to manipulate. Maybe that's why she got involved with her in the first place. That's pretty much everything we heard at the trial. Before both sides gave their closing arguments, the jury was sent to deliberate. When they returned, they found both women guilty of their charges. Savannah Brockill was found guilty, Frankie Smith guilty of allowing it to happen. Next, of course, came the sentencing. When it was time for Star's family, the same Anita, David, everyone who tried to sound the alarm, to speak, they didn't hold back. But somehow, Savannah always got her way. She wanted this child in her care. Why? Meanwhile, Frankie. How did they describe Frankie? Way described her as a girl who never grew up. The same description as in the beginning. Her personality, they said, completely changed after meeting Savannah. They believe she is not
a murder conviction for Savannah Brockill, because to me she was just pure evil. It was like, as I say, we were just a quiet, lovely family, and she ascended from the bowels of hell and just completely devastated, wrecked our family. And it's like we said, I know Frankie, she could have got her out of that situation, but if Frankie had never met Savannah Brockill, none of this would have never have happened. So we knew then, it's something's not right. We did our best, but she was isolated. She took her away from us in Baildon to Keighley, took Stars, blocked all his phones, so we weren't no contact. It was just a classic case of brainwashing, and absolutely.
Seen here with Alicia, she was very loved and looked out for by her extended family.
She loved music. My granddad would play the guitar, and my nan had this thing in the kitchen. It was like...
It wasn't a snap. No, it was just the logical conclusion. But the judge also went after Frankie. This is important. Yes, Frankie is easily manipulated. Yes, she has a low IQ. She wasn't the driving force, not the initiator. That's true. However, it's a huge however. She wasn't so paralyzed by fear of Savannah that she couldn't stop anything. She could have done so many things. She had dozens of options. She could have just broken up with her, reported her to the police. She could have lived with her family, who, despite all their problems, were begging her, trying to support her. She could have just let Star stay where she was safe, well cared for, with Anita David, who genuinely loved, nurtured Star. She could have just told the truth during one of five separate visits from social services. She had 5 chances. But instead, Frankie just stood by. She stood, watched. She allowed it to happen. Savannah Brockill was given a life sentence, with a minimum term of 25 years in prison before she can even apply for release. Frankie, the mother, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Just 8. She must serve at least 2/3 of her sentence before she can be released. Here's the courtroom behavior. During the sentencing, it was said that Savannah showed no emotion, not a drop. She showed no remorse throughout the entire trial. She didn't admit to her actions. They say that since her prison term began, Savannah walks around surrounded by guards, obviously to avoid where people like her, aren't very popular. But despite this, Savannah walks around with a smile, says that she, get this, enjoys her time in prison. In interviews she somehow gives after the trial, she takes zero responsibility for her part in this. Even though Savannah acts so, I personally know she's suffering inside. I think she's exactly the type of person who desperately needs everyone around her to think she's fine. Because if she admits that, it means she's not fine. She can't control her own emotions. I am just sure that any smile on her face in that prison is completely fake. It's a mask. I also believe that Frankie's sentence, 8 years, was just not enough. It's a joke. Her family said they're ready to take her back when she gets out. But I honestly think she should be in prison for much, much longer. I just don't understand how anyone could forgive her for her role in this. But I suppose many of her family members genuinely believe the story, that she was just so manipulated, that this whole thing just happened on its own. There's one more aspect of this case I wanted to mention. It's something I don't think we talk about enough. Specifically, how badly these tragedies affect other people, the families. As we heard earlier, Frankie's father, Andrew Smith, the same one with the history of Andrew, actually wrote a note to Frankie, sent it to her in prison. In it, he said, You look after yourself, I'll look after the baby. You know when? On Frankie's birthday. When Andrew was found, Little Star's coat was lying next to him. On the window was her handprint, which he never dared to wipe away. He was just holding on to what was left of her. As for social services involvement in this case, yes, of course. Another investigation was launched into how this case was handled. To be honest, at this point, I'm already a bit tired of talking about all these investigations because they all, absolutely all, find the same thing. More could have been done. Lessons will be learned. Blah, blah, blah. Then nothing ever changes.
Thank you for watching. From Dwight Abbey. This story is a horrifying reminder that sometimes social services had 5 separate documented chances to save Star Hobson. 5. They were given reports. They were even shown video. They failed every single time. Labeled the desperate pleas from her great-grandfather as malicious. So let us know what you think. Does that system, the one that had 5 chances to intervene, where do you draw the line between incompetence, complicity? Rest in peace, Little Star Hobson. Also, please check out the next videos you see on the screen right now. Believe us, we worked just as hard on those. So we're not even saying goodbye. We'll see you over there.